Shonens play a very big part in an anime fan's fandom, but from what I've seen, from my circle anyways, as most of them grew older, their interests seemed to fall off. I admittedly was one of those, and this is how a particular seinen drew me back again. I think it would not be unfair to say that almost every avid anime fan started off with a shonen, be it Dragon Ball, Yu Yu Hakusho, Hunter x Hunter, Naruto, Bleach, One Piece, etc. Obviously, I'm one of those guys. I've watched every one of those anime I've mentioned. Well, except one, but look, I did read the manga, okay? I just wasn't the biggest fan of its art direction back then, when it came to its anime counterpart. But putting that aside, I had the greatest time watching and reading every single one of those. Let's start off with what obviously attracted most of the younger male audience to those shows. Before I was exposed to anime, cartoons were a really big thing for me. The likes of Tom and Jerry, The Flintstones, Johnny Quest, Scooby-Doo, etc. As a kid, I didn't mind at all if I've watched an episode over and over again. Even if I already knew what would happen next in an episode, I still had fun. But when I stumbled upon this monkey-tailed kid beating up an assorted list of baddies in the most spectacular way, muscular men who could knock the living daylights out of you with a single slap, monsters about 100 times his size or even more, and this green dude with antennas sticking out of his forehead. It just blew me away, and it wasn't like some of the cartoons back then didn't have its fair share of action. The likes of Captain Planet, occasionally Dexter's Lab, and most especially Powerpuff Girls. But obviously Dragon Ball was very different, maybe because of how it incorporated some form of martial art in it. It's just made its action sequences 1,000 times better than the cartoons I watched.
You fool! What are you talking about?
Add to the fact that its fight scenes were much more prolonged. As a kid, I really didn't mind the dialogue all too much. Visuals were more important for me, and Dragon Ball clearly had it in spades. As I watched more and more of this anime and slowly dropped cartoons off entirely, I began to grasp everything else that made this show a whole lot better than all the cartoons I've watched combined. The hype before every single fight, especially during boss fights. The underdog beating the odds. The story that led to the grand battles. The funny interactions between characters. Heck, it even had some drama which admittedly made me tear up. Of course, just one show wasn't enough. I delved and enjoyed thoroughly the rest of the shonens I could lay my eyes on. But one anime which I still consider my favorite really stood out from the rest of them. Not even shows that came along later on could knock it off from the top of my list. Right off the bat, this show, at the time, looked a whole lot better than the rest of the anime I was exposed to during those days. How the characters looked, the world where this anime took place, everything was just a massive upgrade compared to its competition. And I haven't even mentioned the fluidity in its battles, the detail in its fight choreography. It was something that just took my breath away. But the most impressive aspect of this anime, and I think most fans out there would agree, was its nen system, its intricacy, its complexity.
放出、強化、変化、操作、具現化、特質の6つのタイプに大別されます。
All the shows I've watched before Hunter x Hunter usually were quite straightforward when it came to their abilities. Though those anime did try to vary it somewhat, it still came down to who's got the flashier, more explosive, more destructive ability that would determine the overall strength of a certain character. But when it came to Hunter x Hunter and its nen system, each character truly were unique with what they could serve to the table. And I think this was most exemplified by Kurapika.
特質系の今の私はどの系統の能力も 100% 引き出せる
Not only because of the fact that he could use all types of nen during his emperor time, but the creativity behind his main weapon, his chains, and how each had its own unique role, and most especially the tragic condition that must be met in order for him to use his abilities in the first place. Hunter x Hunter was such a unique gem and is one of the main reasons why there's always a special place for anime, or more specifically shonen anime, in my heart. But as great as those shows were, I guess sometimes it just can't overcome its main foe, adulthood. The big three, legendary shows by their own right, that would surely be included in the annals of anime history as the shows that made not only the shonen genre reach new heights, but the entire anime industry as a whole. Before these three, the only anime I could recall that had as much success popularity-wise was Dragon Ball and Pokemon. The rest were only talked about in circles that enjoy their occasional anime. But as big as these three became, it still couldn't keep a hold on every one of its fans, especially those who were reaching adulthood. There were varying reasons as to why some fans who I knew personally lost interest. Some say it became a little too over the top and it's detracted from being the show that they fell in love with in its earlier stages. Others simply found something better to watch, but personally, I think I began to think of the whole thing as childish. Back then, when I still enjoyed these shows, of course the Saga battles, the rivalries, and the encompassing plot played a large part in it. But more than that, it was because of the values it tried to convey. Those of camaraderie, of hard work, and of empathy. But as I grew older and became more familiar with the harshness and unforgiving nature of the world, I began to see the whole thing as a little too cheesy. That despite all of its flair, I couldn't stop my eyes from rolling when they started to talk about the values I mentioned earlier. I began to see the shows as nothing more than just a gathering of 12-year-olds going through adolescence trying to figure out the most basic morals in the world. With this train of thought forcing itself in my mind, I began to develop a complete distaste for shonens, and only shonens, not all of anime. Sadly, even though if someone had advised me to watch a seinen anime instead, I think I was still at a stage where I couldn't take an anime seriously that had more adult themes in it. I guess my taste in anime back then still hasn't matured enough yet, because if I wanted to watch something that tackled serious real-life issues, then there are unlimited sources of movies and documentaries out there which feature real people who can convey real emotions. And with that, I just dismissed the idea of watching anything tagged with the shonen genre from that point onward. Instead, every time I try to search for an anime I could enjoy, I lean towards comedy instead, because after all, that's the very reason why I started watching anime in the first place, to be entertained, and no genre was more effective at doing that than comedy. But after a while, I did sort of miss the shonen genre and tried to get myself in it again. After some unsuccessful attempts, I landed on this one. I'm going to be honest, initially I really wasn't all that excited about this show. To add to my lack of interest, I knew nothing of this anime beforehand. I didn't know of its source material, or whether it was even based on a manga or light novel. Nothing at all. I kind of just forced myself to watch its first few episodes just to see if it was worth tuning in. Because even though I decided to give shonens another shot, I still had this image of it being for kids. And it didn't help one bit that the first impressions some of the shonens I tried watching before Vinland Saga were just a little subpar. I really thought that maybe this would be my last attempt at giving shonens another shot. Have a look at what each show has to offer, be reminded of why I had developed a distaste for it in the first place, and completely drop it off. Would I have to say goodbye to this genre that had given me so many moments of happiness, hype, excitement, disbelief? Thankfully though, that wasn't the case for this one. Opening with such a beautifully executed fight sequence, it immediately grasped my attention. Most especially because this was the first time I was actually exposed to some good anime CG for once. And then it didn't slow down from there. Episode after great episode, this anime had successfully entangled my heart with its brutal and realistic portrayal of war during the Viking Age, the political strife between nations, and even within the ruling family of a country, and a deeply layered and somewhat realistic approach on how morality really worked during this age. In a time where savagery was the norm, feuds weren't settled by a simple declaration of, hey, let's be friends. Of course, I didn't fail to notice that the themes for this anime weren't for kids at all. And if it wasn't for it being an anime that somehow softens the moments of gore in this show, then I don't think even your normal adult viewer could stomach it. It was then I realized that maybe I've subjected myself to this very shallow mentality when it came to shonens. Just as how deeply layered Vinland Saga is, where it actually makes you think and in some events would have you go through a deep introspection, maybe some of the shonens I immediately dismissed also had the same elements to it. Maybe I was just a little too harsh and close-minded that the message it tried to give to its audience, I only took it on a very surface level, failing to realize that it was up to me to interpret those on a level that was more befitting for me as an older viewer. And it was through that realization that now I've discovered a new and deeper appreciation towards shonens. Sure, some of its aspects, especially when it comes to the subject of moral dilemma, might not be well suited for a more mature audience, but it's because these shows are catered for younger viewers. But that doesn't mean as an older viewer you can't relate such subjects to something similar to your own experiences. The thing is, for me personally, I now see shonens as a genre that tries to break down subject matters that are so complex that it may now come off as something so basic. But what we, particularly I myself, have almost failed to realize is that these are the foundations upon which Seinens like Vinland Saga are built upon. Shonens are what opened our eyes to this wonderful world of anime. Shonens also introduced us to the deeper world of Seinens. And Seinens remind us that there is actually more to shonens than meets the eye. Long live shonens, long live Seinens, long live anime. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button to get more of the good stuff like this one. But if you didn't, there's always that dislike button down there. Also, let me know how you got introduced to anime. Was it also through a shonen or an anime from another genre? Just comment down below. Till next time.